When the world heard that Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman were getting a divorce, it sent shockwaves through fans everywhere. They weren't just another celebrity couple, they were a symbol of lasting love in Hollywood. A reminder that true love could survive fame, distance, and the constant spotlight. But on September 30th, when news broke that Nicole had officially filed for divorce, people couldn't believe it. For years, they had appeared inseparable, attending events hand in hand and speaking lovingly about each other in interviews. Yet, behind those red carpet smiles, something had quietly fallen apart. What truly made the news even more emotional was Keith Urban's raw confession that followed shortly after. Without any fancy publicist statement or polished interview, Keith spoke directly from the heart, saying he had blown his marriage to smithereens. His words were full of regret, honesty, and pain. Fans were stunned, not because of the breakup itself, but because of how real and unfiltered his admission was. For years, people saw Keith and Nicole as proof that love could withstand anything. But his confession pulled back the curtain and revealed a man who had made mistakes, who loved deeply, and who knew he had lost something irreplaceable. Looking back, there had been small signs that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. During a 2024 tribute event, Keith got emotional while thanking Nicole for rescuing him during difficult times. At that moment, most fans thought it was a touching moment between a loving couple. But after their divorce, many began to see it differently. Perhaps as an early sign that Keith felt he had leaned too much on her strength. Nicole had always been his rock, especially during his struggles with addiction and mental health. But sometimes, even love can feel heavy when one person carries too much of the weight. People close to them later said that Nicole had done everything she could to hold the marriage together, especially for their daughters. She stood by Keith through rehab, career stress, and the endless demands of fame. Yet, as Keith himself admitted, the pressures became too much. He didn't blame her. He didn't make excuses. He simply said he had failed to protect what they had built together. That kind of honesty hit fans hard. Many felt sympathy for him. A man who loved deeply but lost his way. Others, however, felt his confession came too late. Whatever people thought, one thing was clear. The picture-perfect marriage that had inspired millions was now broken. As with every Hollywood breakup, rumors began to swirl almost instantly. Some fans wondered if there was another woman involved. Attention soon turned toward Maggie Bohr, a 25-year-old guitarist who had been performing with Keith on tour. Videos began to circulate online, showing moments between the two that seemed unusually close, including one where Keith reportedly changed the lyrics of his hit song, The Fighter, to include her name. TikTok and tabloids exploded with theories, and soon the rumor mill was in full swing. Even Maggie's father made a vague comment that only fueled speculation. Still, no one confirmed anything. Not Keith, not Maggie, and certainly not Nicole. The silence from all sides made the gossip even louder. Some insiders claimed Nicole felt deeply betrayed, especially after everything she had endured with Keith's personal battles. But others suggested that there may not have been another person at all, that the real, other woman was Keith's demanding career, his fame, and the demons he had been fighting for years. Addiction, exhaustion, and the pressure to stay relevant can destroy even the strongest relationships. For Keith, music had always been both a blessing and a burden. It gave him purpose, but often pulled him away from the people who mattered most. Whether there was another woman or not, the result was the same. Two hearts drifting apart under the weight of fame and emotional distance. For almost 2 decades, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman represented everything people wanted to believe about love. They had beauty, talent, fame, and most importantly, what looked like a real connection. Fans adored how Nicole supported Keith through his toughest times, and how he, in turn, cherished her with open affection. But as their individual careers continued to soar, the couple faced a challenge that many celebrity pairs never overcome: time apart. Nicole was busy filming across continents, often on movie sets for months. Keith, on the other hand, was constantly touring, performing in different cities night after night. The physical distance slowly became emotional distance. They both tried to make it work, planning family time whenever possible. But the strain began to show. Friends noticed how Nicole started appearing alone at more events, while Keith attended music ceremonies without her. Fans brushed it off as normal for busy stars. But those close to the couple saw the growing silence. When Keith finally said he had blown it, it felt less like a surprise and more like confirmation of what people had quietly sensed, that even the most glamorous relationships can crumble when two people are simply too far apart for too long. It was never about a lack of love. It was about love getting lost in the noise of life. Before the pain and the headlines, Keith and Nicole's story was one of Hollywood's most touching romances. Their journey began in 2005 at an event in Los Angeles celebrating Australian talent. Nicole had recently gone through a difficult divorce from Tom Cruise and was focusing on rebuilding her life. Keith, already a rising country music star, carried a humble charm that instantly caught her attention. Nicole later said she thought he was dreamy the first time she saw him, though Keith admitted he was too nervous to call her for months after getting her number. When he finally did, everything clicked. Their conversations were deep and meaningful. Not about fame, but about life, family, and faith. By 2006, they were married in a stunning Sydney ceremony. Nicole wore a Balenciaga gown, and Keith sang to her during the wedding, a moment that melted hearts around the world. Fans adored them because their love felt real, not another Hollywood fantasy. Nicole often said Keith made her feel safe and grounded, while Keith called her his savior, crediting her with helping him stay sober and focused. Together, they seemed unstoppable, building a family with their daughters, Sunday and Faith. For years, they were the example of how love could survive fame. But as time went on, that same fame began testing the very foundation of their relationship. For Nicole, the end of her marriage to Keith wasn't her first heartbreak. Long before Keith, she had already lived through one of Hollywood's most famous love stories. Her marriage to Tom Cruise. They met in 1989 on the set of Days of Thunder, and quickly became one of the industry's most talked-about power couples. Together, they adopted 2 children, Isabella and Connor. From the outside, they seemed perfect. But after more than a decade, their relationship ended suddenly in 2001, leaving Nicole devastated. She later admitted that she had married young and had lost her sense of self along the way. So when Keith entered her life, it wasn't just love. It was healing. He helped her believe in happiness again, reminding her that it was okay to trust and love deeply. That's why this divorce feels especially painful for fans. Nicole had once found hope in Keith after heartbreak, and now, once again, she finds herself facing loss in the public eye. Insiders say she has chosen silence this time. No interviews, no statements, focusing on her daughters and her work instead. It's the quiet strength that has always defined her. And though her marriage may be over, her grace and resilience continue to earn respect from fans around the world. For Nicole, this isn't just another failed Hollywood romance. It's another chapter in a life that has known both the beauty and the pain of love. When Keith Urban said, "I blew it," he wasn't just admitting to a mistake, he was acknowledging something deeper. Love, no matter how strong or genuine, can fall apart if it's not nurtured through life's storms. Keith's words carried the weight of regret, but also a quiet honesty that few celebrities ever show. Maybe that's why his confession touched so many hearts. Fans could see themselves in his pain. The feeling of losing someone not because of betrayal or hate, but because time, distance, and unspoken struggles slowly built walls between them. In the end, Keith and Nicole's story isn't about scandal. It's about the fragile nature of love. The same fame and success that once brought them together eventually became the very things that pulled them apart. Today, both of them continue to move forward, Nicole focusing on her film career and family, Keith pouring his emotions into music. Their story reminds us that even the most beautiful relationships can end. But that doesn't mean they weren't real. Sometimes, love doesn't have to last forever to be meaningful. It just has to be true while it lasts. And maybe that's the lesson Keith wanted to share with the world. That even when love fades, the memories remain, and the honesty of owning one's mistakes is the first step toward healing. After his emotional confession, Keith Urban found himself standing at a crossroads, not just in his personal life, but in his identity as a man, a father, and an artist. The world saw the headlines about his divorce. But behind the scenes, Keith was facing something much deeper. The struggle to forgive himself. His words, "I blew it," weren't meant for the media. They were words of self-reflection, a moment of brutal honesty from a man who had loved deeply and lost something precious. For decades, Keith's music had been his therapy. Every lyric, every melody carried pieces of his soul. But after his marriage fell apart, his songs began to sound different, softer, more vulnerable, and full of regret. Those close to him said that Keith stopped chasing fame and started chasing meaning. Instead of writing about love and success, he began exploring loss, guilt, and redemption. For a man who had spent much of his life trying to overcome his own demons, the breakup wasn't just an ending. It was a wake-up call to rediscover who he was without Nicole by his side. Keith has never hidden his struggles with addiction. Long before he married Nicole Kidman, he battled substance abuse issues that nearly ended his career. When he first entered rehab in 1998, few people in the country music world knew the extent of his problem, but those who did knew how serious it was. Fame had come fast, and the pressure of constant touring, performing, and being in the public eye had pushed him towards self-destructive habits. After meeting Nicole, many fans believed she had saved him, and in many ways she did. Nicole stood by him through his darkest nights, encouraging him to seek help, stay sober, and find peace. Keith often credited her for giving him a second chance at life. But addiction recovery isn't a straight path. Even after years of success, the emotional scars never truly go away. For Keith, the hardest part wasn't just staying sober. It was learning to live with the guilt of the past. When his marriage started to fall apart, those feelings resurfaced, and he admitted that the pain brought him to the edge once again. After the divorce, Keith poured all his emotions into music. It became his way of coping, a way to say what words couldn't. In interviews, he hinted that his next album would be his most personal yet, a raw reflection of his heartache and self-discovery. Songs that once sounded upbeat began to carry a bittersweet tone. His lyrics spoke about loss, forgiveness, and learning to live with regret. Fans noticed how his voice, always filled with energy and warmth, now carried a certain sadness. But that vulnerability made his performances even more powerful. People weren't just hearing a country star. They were hearing a man trying to put himself back together. During one of his concerts, he told the crowd, "Sometimes the hardest songs to sing are the ones that heal you the most." Those words resonated deeply with fans who had followed his journey for years. Keith Urban wasn't just performing. He was healing in real time, in front of thousands of people who saw their own heartbreaks reflected in his music. Despite the pain, Keith never stopped expressing gratitude toward Nicole. He didn't lash out, didn't point fingers. Instead, he spoke respectfully about their years together, calling her an incredible woman who gave me love when I didn't think I deserved it. That honesty reminded people why Keith had always stood out from the typical Hollywood crowd. Even in heartbreak, he showed humility and class. Friends say that Keith still carries deep affection for Nicole, not as a failed partner, but as someone who once saved him when he needed saving most. That kind of connection doesn't just disappear. It becomes part of who you are. And for Keith, that love continues to echo through his songs. A bittersweet melody of gratitude and loss. Part of what made Keith and Nicole's relationship so difficult was the constant push and pull between their careers and their family life. For Keith, music wasn't just a job. It was his identity. He lived for the stage, for the connection with fans, and for the adrenaline of performing. But the same passion that fueled his success also created distance in his marriage. Nicole's world was Hollywood, with red carpets, film festivals, and long shooting schedules. Keith's world was Nashville, with tours, studio sessions, and the grind of life on the road. They tried to blend their worlds, but the rhythm was never quite in sync. Keith once said in an interview, "The hardest part about being married to someone you love is being apart from them when your careers pull you in opposite directions." That truth eventually became their reality. Even when they were together, work often followed them. There was always another script for Nicole to read or another concert for Keith to prepare for. The moments in between became shorter, the silences longer. And as their daughters grew older, it became even harder to keep a stable routine. Keith wanted to be a present father, but he also wanted to keep the momentum of his music career alive. The pressure to do both eventually took a toll. Insiders say Keith started feeling like he was failing, as a husband, as a father, and as a man. His confession about blowing the marriage wasn't just about romantic mistakes. It was about the guilt of not being able to balance everything. Fame had given him everything he dreamed of, but at a cost he never expected, losing the one person who stood by him through it all. Today, at 57, Keith Urban is still standing, older, wiser, and more self-aware. He continues to perform, but there's a calmness about him now that wasn't there before. Friends describe him as more reflective, more grounded. Instead of chasing perfection, he focuses on authenticity. He's spoken about learning to forgive himself, to accept that some things can't be fixed, only understood. In a recent interview, Keith said something that deeply moved fans. When you go through something painful, you have two choices: to close your heart or to let it teach you something. For him, the divorce was a painful teacher. It showed him what love truly means. Not perfection, but presence. Not promises, but understanding. He's also taken time to reconnect with his daughters, making them his top priority. Photos of him spending quiet weekends at home or traveling with them instead of performing every night show a man who has redefined success. For Keith, the stage will always be home, but his family is now his anchor. He has said that music may have saved him, but his daughters remind him why life is worth living. The love he once shared with Nicole may have ended, but it gave him something far greater: perspective. Through heartbreak, he found clarity. Through mistakes, he found growth. And through loss, he found a deeper form of love, one that begins with himself. As Keith Urban continues his journey, his legacy is no longer just about chart-topping hits or awards. It's about resilience, redemption, and the courage to be honest about one's flaws. In an industry where image often matters more than truth, Keith stands out as a man who chose vulnerability over vanity. His fans love him not because he's perfect, but because he's real. Every note he sings now carries the weight of experience. The highs of fame, the lows of addiction, the joy of love, and the pain of letting go. People who once admired him for his talent now admire him for his honesty. His story serves as a reminder that no one, not even a celebrity, is immune to heartbreak or failure. What truly defines a person is how they rise after falling. Keith's rise hasn't been dramatic or flashy. It's been quiet, steady, and genuine. Through music, he continues to share pieces of his soul with the world, turning pain into art. And in doing so, he's helping others heal too. For Keith Urban, life after Nicole Kidman isn't about regret. It's about gratitude. Gratitude for the years they shared, the lessons learned, and the love that shaped him into the man he is today. He once said, "Sometimes we don't realize how much someone gives us until they're gone. But if that love made you better, it was never wasted." Those words reflect a man who's learned the hardest lesson of all. That love, even when it ends, can still transform you. And maybe that's Keith Urban's true legacy. Not just as a singer or a celebrity, but as a man who dared to be honest about his failures, who faced his pain head-on, and who found peace not in perfection, but in truth.